Okay, so you want to own a five-star hotel. Picture it for a second. You're standing in a marble lobby at golden hour. There's a scent in the air. Someone told you they actually pipe it in, a custom blend, fig and white tea, and it hits you the moment the doorman pulls the brass handle. A pianist is playing softly in the corner. There's a wall of fresh orchids that gets replaced every single morning, whether anyone notices or not. Behind the front desk, a staff member already knows your name, knows you like a corner room, knows you take still water, not sparkling. Upstairs, a suite the size of a small apartment looks out over the city or the ocean, and somewhere below you a kitchen run by a chef with a Michelin star is plating dinner for 200 people who each paid more for that meal than most people spend on groceries in a week. And you own all of it. Your name, or your brand, is on the awning. You walk through and everyone nods. This is the good life as an asset class. That's the picture. That's what the movies, the glossy brochures, and the auction listings sell you. Here's the problem. Almost none of the money you're imagining flows the way you think it does. The room rates you're picturing, $400, $600, $1,000 a night. Most of that never becomes profit. The building you fell in love with is quietly eating cash 24 hours a day, whether it's full or empty. The staff that makes it feel effortless is the single most expensive thing you will ever buy, and you can't cut them without killing the exact thing that makes it five-star. And the returns, the actual returns on the actual money, they're often thinner than what you'd get from a boring apartment building with none of the glamour and none of the risk. So let me give you the reframe up front, because it's going to run through everything else. A five-star hotel is not really a hospitality business. It's a real estate business wearing a hospitality costume. A leveraged, cyclical, capital-devouring piece of trophy real estate that happens to sell rooms and dinners to pay its own carrying costs while it waits to do the thing it's actually good at. Read that again. Because if you get that one idea, the rest of the numbers stop being confusing and start being obvious. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly where the money comes from and where it goes. You'll understand why two hotels charging the exact same room rate can be, financially, completely different businesses. You'll understand why the richest people who own these places often don't run them, don't even want to run them, and are quietly playing a different game entirely. And you'll understand why one of the most famous luxury hotel projects in modern history sat as a giant blue skeleton in the desert for over a decade, and what that skeleton can teach you. But before we talk about money, we need to talk about what a five-star hotel actually is. Because five-star isn't one thing. It's a marketing phrase that got stapled onto at least 4 completely different businesses, and they only look alike from the lobby. Some are urban business hotels, the big branded towers in Manhattan, London, Singapore, Dubai, living and dying on corporate travel, conferences, and expense accounts. Some are destination resorts, the beach and mountain properties where the hotel isn't near the vacation, the hotel is the vacation, with the spa and the golf and the 4 restaurants. Some are ultra-luxury boutiques, small, 40 or 60 rooms, absurd rates, run more like a private club than a hotel. And some are the newest species, the branded residence hybrids, where the hotel is really the amenity wrapper around a tower of luxury condos that carry the Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons name and sell for a fortune. Those are not the same business. The city tower is a cash flow machine that's terrified of a recession. The resort is a real estate and experience play that's terrified of a bad weather year and a hurricane map. The boutique is basically a very expensive personality, and the branded residence, well, that's the one where the smart money quietly lives, and we'll come back to it. For most of this, we're going to focus on the classic full-service, standalone 5-star property, the resort or the urban trophy hotel, the thing you actually picture when you hear 5-star. Because that's the one people fall in love with. And that's the one that quietly ruins the most first-time owners. So let's talk about the biggest number. Getting in the door. The upfront cost of a 5-star hotel is enormous, and it comes in 2 totally different flavors. You can buy an existing one, or you can build one. If you build, luxury hotel construction in the United States generally runs somewhere between $600,000 and well over $1 million per room, and industry advisors like HVS and JLL track exactly this. The room count is what the industry calls keys. So a modest 150-key luxury property is a 9-figure project before you've bought a single fork. A big trophy resort, 500 keys with a spa and multiple restaurants and a conference center easily crosses $500 million. Ultra-luxury in a prime market, think a new tower in Manhattan or on the Vegas Strip, can blow past $2 million per key. If you buy instead of build, the sticker prices are just as wild. Trophy hotels trade on a price-per-key basis. Ordinary hotels might sell for a couple $100,000 a key. Prime luxury assets in gateway cities have sold for well over $1 million a key, and record deals have gone far higher. When the Waldorf Astoria in New York sold to the Anbang Insurance Group in 2015, the price was around $1.95 billion for one hotel. Now here's the lesson buried in that number, and it's the first thing that separates people who understand this business from people who just have money. The price you pay and the profit you make are two completely different numbers, and they are barely related. You are not buying a stream of income at a sensible multiple. You are buying a trophy, and trophies are priced on prestige, scarcity, and what the last billionaire was willing to pay, not on how much cash the building throws off. That Waldorf price implied a yield so low that on the income alone, it barely made sense. That's not a hospitality valuation. That's an art valuation. Keep that in your back pocket. So far, so good. You've got your building. That's when the costs you never budgeted for start to arrive. First, the FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. This is everything that isn't the building itself, the beds, the linens, the carpets, the lobby furniture, the kitchen line, the spa tables, the artwork. In a luxury property this runs tens of thousands of dollars per room, and here's the trap, it isn't a one-time cost. It wears out. A 5-star hotel that hasn't been renovated in 7 or 8 years stops being a 5-star hotel, no matter what the plaque says. So owners set aside a reserve, usually a percentage of revenue every single year, purely to rip out and replace things that still look fine to you and me. The carpet gets replaced on a schedule. The mattresses get replaced on a schedule. Guests can smell tired. Second, the technology and back-of-house spine nobody sees. The property management system, the reservation platform, the point of sale in every restaurant, the keycard system, the surveillance, the fire and life safety systems, the industrial laundry, the kitchen refrigeration. A commercial kitchen alone in a serious hotel can be a 7-figure build-out. None of it is glamorous. All of it is mandatory. And it all breaks. Third, and this is the one that shocks first-time owners, the brand. Most 5-star hotels you can name are not actually operated by the person who owns the building. The owner signs a management contract or a franchise deal with a brand like Marriott, which owns Ritz-Carlton in St. Regis, or Hilton, or Hyatt, or Accor, or Four Seasons. And that brand takes a cut right off the top. Typically a base management fee of around 2 to 4% of total revenue, plus an incentive fee that can run around 8 to 15% of gross operating profit, plus contributions to the brand's marketing and loyalty programs. Let that land for a moment. Before you pay your mortgage, before you pay your staff, before you pay your electric bill, a slice of your revenue walks out the door to the name on the awning. You paid for the building. They own the reason people trust it. Fourth, the working capital and the pre-opening burn. You have to hire and train hundreds of people before you earn a single dollar. You have to stock the wine cellar, the kitchen, the linens, the amenities. You have to run soft opening nights at a loss to shake out the operation. A luxury hotel can burn through millions before it ever hits a normal occupancy. First-time owners consistently run out of money not on the building, on the 6 months after the building is done. So add it up. The purchase or the build is just the down payment on the down payment. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Here's the core mechanism that recontextualizes this entire business, and I want you to slow down with me here. A hotel sells a product that is the most perishable product on earth. More perishable than fish, more perishable than flowers. It sells a room night. And a room night that goes unsold tonight is gone forever. You can't inventory it. You can't sell tonight's empty room tomorrow. At midnight, the value of every empty room in your building instantly becomes zero, permanently. Now pair that with the other half of the machine, your costs barely move. Whether that hotel is 95% full or 30% full, you are heating it, cooling it, lighting it, insuring it, staffing the front desk, running the kitchen, and paying the mortgage. The industry calls these fixed costs, and in a luxury hotel they are enormous, because five-star service is, by definition, labor you cannot remove. A budget motel can send everyone home when it's empty. A five-star hotel cannot fire the concierge because Tuesday is slow. Put those two facts together and you get the single most important idea in the whole business. It's called operating leverage. Because your costs are mostly fixed and your revenue is wildly variable, the last few rooms you sell each night are almost pure profit. The building's already lit, the staff's already there, so that extra room night costs you a bar of soap and some laundry. But it cuts the other way just as hard. The rooms you don't sell don't just cost you their rate. They cost you nothing to lose and everything to carry. A 10% drop in occupancy doesn't cut your profit by 10%. It can wipe it out entirely. The business makes almost all of its money in the top slice of a good year, and gives it all back in the bottom slice of a bad one. That's the aha. A five-star hotel is a high fixed cost, perishable inventory business, which is a fancy way of saying it's a machine that's spectacular near the top and catastrophic near the bottom, with almost nothing in between. It doesn't get a little worse in a downturn. It falls off a cliff. So how does the money actually come in? Not the way you think. It arrives in layers. The first layer is rooms. Room revenue. This is the one everyone fixates on, and here's how professionals measure it. They don't really care about the room rate by itself. They care about ADR, average daily rate, the average price of a sold room, and they care about occupancy, the percent of rooms full. And then they multiply those two together to get the number that actually matters. RevPAR, revenue per available room. Not per sold room. Per available room, full or not. Because a hotel with $1,000 rate that's half empty can lose to a hotel with a $400 rate that's always full. Rate times occupancy. That's the real scoreboard, and STR, Smith Travel Research, now part of CoStar, publishes it for the entire industry. The second layer is food and beverage. The restaurants, the bars, the room service, the minibar. In a big luxury property this can rival room revenue in size, but here's the trap. Hotel food and beverage is famously bad at making money. Restaurants run on thin margins, banquets and weddings are the profitable part, and a celebrity chef restaurant in your lobby is often there for prestige and to justify the room rate, not because it prints cash. It's a loss leader wearing a tuxedo. The third layer is the high-margin extras, and this is where luxury quietly wins. The spa. The golf, the cabanas and the daybeds, the events and conferences that book out entire floors, parking, and in resort markets, resort fees. These carry fat margins because you've already built the building. The spa treatment is mostly labor and oil, and you're charging $300 for it. This layer is small in a city business hotel and huge in a destination resort, which is exactly why those are different businesses. And the fourth layer, the one that isn't even on the hotel's income statement, is the real estate itself and the branded residences. Hold that thought. That's the deeper game, and we'll get there. Now let's talk about the bleed. The operating costs. The money that leaves every single day whether anyone checks in or not. The biggest by far is labor. A five-star hotel is staggeringly people-heavy. Where a budget hotel might run well under half an employee per room, a full-service luxury resort can run 1, 2, even 3 employees per room once you count the restaurants, the spa, housekeeping, engineering, security, and management. That's the product. The turned-down bed, the remembered name, the instant room service. That's not magic, that's payroll. Labor and related costs routinely eat 30 to 45% of a luxury hotel's revenue, and it's the one cost you cannot cut without cutting the stars off your own building. Then the utilities. A big hotel is a small city that never sleeps, laundry running around the clock, kitchens, pools, HVAC for hundreds of rooms and vast public spaces. Energy is a serious 6 or 7-figure line item annually in a large property. Then repairs and maintenance, and the reserve for the big stuff. Something is always broken. An elevator, a boiler, a roof, a pool pump, and the industry sets aside a capital reserve, often 4 to 5% of total revenue every year, sometimes more for aging luxury assets, just to fund the inevitable renovations. Skip it for a few years and you don't save money. You just convert an operating problem into $100 million problem later. Then insurance, and this one is getting scarier every year. Trophy properties, especially beachfront resorts, are insuring against fire, flood, hurricane, and liability, and in coastal markets those premiums have exploded. A single storm season can reprice your entire insurance bill. Then property taxes, which on a trophy asset assessed in the hundreds of millions are enormous and don't care whether you had a good year. And then, underneath all of it, the debt. Because almost nobody buys these with cash. They borrow, and the interest on hundreds of millions of dollars is a fixed monster that shows up every month regardless of occupancy. When interest rates jump, as they did dramatically in 2022 and 2023, that monster gets bigger overnight, and it has bankrupted hotels that were operationally healthy. Which brings us to risk. Because everything I just described sits on top of the most cyclical demand in the economy. Here's the mechanism, and it's brutal in its simplicity. Luxury travel is the most discretionary spending there is. Nobody needs $1,000 suite. So the instant the economy wobbles, that demand doesn't soften, it evaporates. Corporate travel budgets get frozen. Conferences get canceled. The wedding gets downsized. And remember our operating leverage? A hotel that needs, say, 60% occupancy just to break even suddenly finds itself at 35%. The revenue falls off a cliff, the fixed costs don't move, and the losses are immediate and enormous. This is why hotels are always among the very first businesses to collapse in a recession and among the last to recover. We watched it happen at planetary scale in 2020, when global occupancy briefly fell to numbers the industry had never seen, and trophy properties that had cost billions sat essentially empty. So now let me tell you a true story. Because there's a building that holds every lesson in this video in one giant, unavoidable monument. In the mid-2000s, a developer named Jeffrey Soffer set out to build something spectacular on the north end of the Las Vegas Strip, the Fontainebleau Las Vegas, a 68-story blue glass tower, thousands of rooms, a casino, the whole trophy dream, carrying one of the most storied names in American luxury hospitality. The plan was gorgeous. The financing was aggressive. Construction started in 2007, right at the top of the market, and the projected cost climbed toward $3 billion. And then the music stopped. The 2008 financial crisis hit. Credit froze. In 2009, the lenders pulled their financing, and the project, already most of the way built, standing there gleaming over the Strip, filed for bankruptcy. Construction just stopped. The dream became a skeleton. Carl Icahn, the famous investor, scooped up the unfinished tower out of bankruptcy in 2010 for a reported figure around $150 million, a tower that had cost billions, bought for pennies on the dollar, because a half-finished hotel produces exactly 0 room nights and burns money just standing there. And then it sat. For years. A giant blue monument to operating leverage and bad timing, visible from every plane landing in Vegas. It changed hands. It got renamed and then renamed back. And it wasn't until December of 2023, roughly 16 years after construction began, that the Fontainebleau Las Vegas finally opened its doors, with a total price tag that climbed to something in the neighborhood of $3.5 to $4 billion. So what's the lesson? It's not, don't build hotels. The lesson is that a 5-star hotel is a bet on time and timing that you don't fully control. The building itself was never the problem. It was beautiful. It was well located. It eventually opened. The problem was that the business has almost no ability to survive a gap between when you spend the money and when the guests arrive. Line up the spending and the demand, and you win. Miss the timing by even a year or two, and the most beautiful tower in the desert becomes the most expensive empty object in the state. The building doesn't care about your business plan. The cycle does. Now, here's where the sophisticated money quietly separates itself from the dreamers. Because if the room and restaurant business is this fragile, why do the wealthiest people and biggest funds keep buying these things? They're not stupid. They're playing a different game, the deeper game. Here's the first move. They don't run the hotel. Remember that management contract that felt like a tax? The smart owner flips it into a feature. Brands like Marriott and Hilton figured out decades ago that owning the building is the risky, capital-heavy part, so they mostly stopped owning buildings. They went asset-light. They collect fees off other people's real estate. And the smartest owners think the same way in reverse. They own the trophy real estate, they let a world-class brand run the messy operation, and they treat the whole thing less like a business and more like a piece of appreciating land with a cash flow tenant on top. Which is the second move, and it's the big one. For the sophisticated owner, the room revenue was never the point. It was just enough to carry the asset while the land underneath it did the real work. Trophy Hotel real estate in Manhattan, in Miami, on the Strip, on the world's best beaches. That land tends to appreciate over decades in a way that dwarfs the annual operating profit. The hotel operation is essentially paying you to hold a scarce piece of the planet. That Waldorf sale, that low yield, it only looks crazy if you think you're buying an income stream. It looks brilliant if you know you're buying irreplaceable Manhattan real estate with a self-funding tenant. And the third move, the newest and cleverest, is the branded residence. This is the layer that isn't even on the hotel's income statement. You build the trophy tower, and instead of making all of it hotel rooms, you carve off a big chunk as luxury condominiums that carry the hotel's brand, Four Seasons private residences, Ritz-Carlton residences. And here's the magic. You sell those units up front, for enormous premiums, often before the building even opens. Buyers pay a huge markup, frequently 30% or more over comparable unbranded units, just to have the name on the door and the hotel's service on call. You get a massive slug of cash at the start, you de-risk the whole project, and the hotel becomes the amenity that sells the condos. The founder of Four Seasons, Isidore Sharp, built an empire on the insight that the name itself was the asset. The building is almost incidental. So put it all together with 2 years. The good year and the bad year. Same hotel. Same building. Same staff. The good year, the economy's humming, corporate travel is back, the calendar's stacked with conferences and weddings. Your occupancy runs in the 70s, your average daily rate is strong, your RevPAR is at record highs. And because of operating leverage, that revenue lands on top of your fixed costs and turns into serious profit. The spa is booked solid at fat margins. The banquet halls are full. Your gross operating profit margin might run in the neighborhood of 30+%. The residences you sold are appreciating, and the land under the building is quietly worth more than it was in January. On paper, you're a genius. This is the year the brochure was telling the truth. The bad year, a recession hits, or a hurricane, or a pandemic, or interest rate spike and refinancing your mortgage suddenly costs millions more. Occupancy craters into the 30s, but the building still needs heating, the mortgage is still due, the property tax bill doesn't shrink, the insurance premium actually went up, and you cannot fire the staff without destroying the 5 stars that are the only reason anyone pays your rate. Revenue falls off a cliff. Fixed costs don't move. You go from a handsome profit to bleeding cash, fast. The same operating leverage that made you a genius now makes you a cautionary tale. And if you're over-leveraged with debt when it happens, you become the Fontainebleau, a beautiful, valuable, empty thing waiting for the cycle to turn. That's the whole business, in 2 years. The distance between them is terrifyingly short. So let's circle back to that marble lobby. The orchids, the pianist, the doorman who knows your name. It's all real. Every bit of it is real. But now you know what it costs, and you know what it's really for. Because the room service and the spa and the perfect turn-down bed, that's not the business. That's the costume. The bed, the meal, the marble, those are just the cash flow that pays the rent on something scarcer and slower and quieter underneath it all. The land. The name. The scarcity. The decades. That's where the real money has always lived. The service isn't really the business. The real estate is.